Right, so in this video I want to shed a bit more light about the economic model underlying the Easter Island setup. So contrary to the fish economy where we had only one stock, so one state variable which was S, so the stock of fish, here S is all resources that are available to islanders, so forest, soil, fish and birds, and of course all these resources that can be affected by how much islanders exploit them. But we have a second state variable, which is the population, here LT. So we simply assume that everybody is working. However, so not everybody might be working in the resource sector. So some of them might be working in some other sectors. So time is continuous. So here we have L and S that are indexed by T. Or so the harvest equation is the most important equation. Here it's H equals alpha beta ls. So in the fishing model, we had beta L that was simply B, so the number of boats. Here we simply have B replaced by beta L, which beta is the percentage of the islanders that work in the harvesting industry, and L is the whole population. So this equation could be well as it is. We could just state there's always a stable fraction of islanders beta that works in the harvesting industry, and that's it. All the other dynamics of the model, all the conclusions wouldn't change. However, it's what is nice is to be able to describe why this is the case, or uh, how from islanders' preferences and technology they come up with this simple this simple relation for H. So this is what we're going to describe more precisely. So the economy has, as I said, two sectors. Now we include another sector for whatever the islanders don't do when they're not harvesting resources. So we're going to label this M, which is some other sector. So it can be so they can produce tools, housing, artistic output, so moai, housing production, etc. And now we have to describe which technology they have. So for the food production, it's almost the same as what we had before. It's just that now we don't know that there's a stable fraction beta that works in the food production industry. Now we're just going to say that certain number of the islanders that we label L sub H work in the harvesting industry, and the other islanders work in the M sector. The technology in the M sector is super simple, so it's just that for every one islander that works in the other good sector, they produce one unit of other good M. And we have finally our budget constraint, which is that the total number of islanders L has to equal the islanders that work in the harvesting industry and the islanders that work in the other goods industry. So this is the setting. Now we have to describe preferences, and with preferences we're going to be able to pin down LH and LM, what we want to know. And once we know LH, then we know our initial harvesting function there. So in the paper they have a market approach. Now I just want to introduce a simpler way to do it, which I think is perfectly valid. Simply put, I'm going to assume that there's a representative islander. So sometimes we represent the whole industry by a representative firm. There's no harm in doing the same here. So we can just assume that there is this all-encompassing islander that as a utility defined in terms of the whole production harvest of the island and the whole production other good of the island, which is simply a Cobb-Douglas function. So h beta m 1 minus beta, and you can already guess where the beta is going to come from. So the more people want harvesting, the more they like harvesting, then the higher they're going to invest in this sector. So this is why we should get the harvesting production that's proportional to beta. One thing that we can do to simplify our lives is already substitute LH and LM in the total labor budget constraint to obtain this thing here. So in a way, it's the same budget constraint, but now it's in terms of opportunity cost. So what that means is, for instance, I know that if I want to increase the harvests by 1 unit, then I have to sacrifice 1 over alpha s units of good m to produce it. And so I could use this and solve it by Lagrangian, or if I'm lazy, and I'm always lazy, so I can do something even simpler. So I can just substitute m in the utility function. So here I get this very simple utility function that's only in terms of ht. So it's h beta l minus h over alpha s 1 minus beta. So the representative islanders problem is quite simple. It's simply to maximize this function and choosing ht. So the first order conditions are to give something similar to what we have with the Cobb-Douglas production function. So here I have two h's in two places. So the first term here is I derive the first h, so I get beta h beta minus 1. This parentheses there doesn't change. Then plus h beta that's here times so the derivative of this term here, which is 1 minus beta parenthesis minus beta multiplied by the content of the parenthesis. So L doesn't change, and I get here so minus 1 over alpha st. That's here. First order condition, so the first derivative of the utility with respect to h has to be equal to 0. Well, I don't put the second derivative. Feel free to do it if you want. Alright. So, and believe me, if I say that once you compute the value of ht, you get something very simple, which is what we were going after. So the harvesting function, which is alpha beta ls. So this is a perfectly fine way to do it, and one could argue that, so if you think about the first theorem of welfare economics, well, if I have a market equilibrium with prices with perfect competition and no market power for anybody, then if I just postulate that that I have that the economic agent can trade freely in the market, then I would get an efficient outcome, which would be this outcome here. So basically, I could just argue that, and I'm done. However, if I want to publish in a very good journal my nice idea, maybe it's not enough, and I have to go ahead and put a bit more structure and introduce prices. So there is one real benefit to introducing real prices in this model. It's now I can really explicitly know what happens when I play with taxes, for instance. So we've seen that that since there is inefficiency that comes from open access to resources, it's the same thing here. So there's going to be over harvesting, and in that case I could want to tax harvests, for instance, or tax food. which seems like a weird thing to do. But if there's overexploitation of food, maybe I shouldn't consume that much, and I would get a better outcome. So that this is something I could get with introducing prices. So that's what we're going to do. So this is the market approach. This is so it's entirely a general equilibrium model in the sense that all the different markets are introduced and so interact explicitly, and all the different prices are there. So for instance, the islanders are going to go into two different markets. In the good markets, in which they can buy uh, food or they can buy other good, and in the labor market where they can work either in the food production sector or in the other goods production sector. So in the first market they have to pay prices to buy goods. In the second they receive, so they supply their labor and receive wage in compensation. So all the prices are there. Everything interacts with everything, and everything has to be in equilibrium. There has to be no surplus or no surplus anywhere. Yeah, so we have we have two prices for the goods sector, but we're going to say that we don't really care about the other goods sector, so we're going to make it the numerator. So its price is simply going to be 1. So the price of food can simply be P, and P is going to be simply the price of food in terms of the other good. So how much of the other good do I need to sacrifice to get one extra unit of food? Now, so I'm going to define the demand of islanders for these two goods. Now I have to describe their supply. Obviously, it's going to be almost the same since the technology is the same. It's just that now I'm going to explicitly index it with the S there, so it's going to be HS, so the supply of harvest, which is going to be alpha SLH, and the rest of the goods is going to be, so the supply, so MS is going to be LM, so it's the same technology as before, it's just now I explicitly say it's a supply of good M. How do we set wages? So wages are set competitively, and it's exactly like in the producer's theory. So how much is a firm willing to pay for a factor? Well, it pays its real marginal productivity. So what's the real marginal productivity in the food sector? Well, it's whatever a worker can produce multiplied by the price of that production. So to know how much a worker can produce, well, it's the total output of the island, so HS, divided by the total number of people who work in that production, so LH, and so this is multiplied by the price of 1 unit of food, which is PT. So I can just simply substitute HS here, and I get this. So WH, the wage in the food sector, is alpha PS. The wage in the other goods sector is even simpler, is because I know that so it's going to be the total output of the other goods. So MS divided by the total number of people who work in that sector, LM. But I know that the production is extremely simple. MS equals LM. So this is 1, and it's multiplied by the price in that sector, which is the numerator 1. So I know that the wage is simply going to be 1. Alright. A couple of other details. So one, now I'm not going to consider a representative islander, but I'm just going to model every islanders. So it's going to be a small u. But obviously the preference is going to be the same. It's just that now it's so a preference for harvest demand, so the number of the amount of food that's demanded by the islander to the beta times the amount of other goods that demanded by the islander to the 1 minus beta. So that's the utility of one islander. Okay, so first important thing that's going to be going on is arbitrage on the labor market. What do I mean? I mean that all wages are going to be the same. Simply put, workers are free to choose whatever sector they want, and they don't have any special preference. All they care is how much money can they earn. So if they can earn more money in one sector, then they're going to be go there. So why is it going to be equal? Well, for the simple reason that imagine that WH is higher than WM, then it doesn't make sense for a new worker to go work in the other goods industry. So they are all going to go into food and industry. And what's going to happen? Well, I can go back to this wage setting equation and see that so LH is going to go up. But I know that if LH go up, so if they produce more food, if more workers go to produce food, then output should go up. LH should increase HS. If there was no effect on S, then it's 1-to-1 and the wage wouldn't change. However, I know that dynamically I know this model, and I know that the more people go to work, so the more I exploit the resource, then the lower the resource stock is going to be in the long run. So the wage is, so H is not going to increase as much as L increases in proportion. So then the ratio H over L is going to decrease, so W is going to decrease. So this is what we mean by what we say that that in the long run, so there's equilibrium on the labor market. So all wages are the same; they're just WT. So last piece of the puzzle, so the budget constraint. So now this is neat because I know that whatever sector I choose, I always get the same wage. What is my wage? Well, it's the wage multiplied by how much I work. But so I can very simply say that individuals, they live for 1 unit of time and they supply 1 unit of labor. So the wage, the total income of one person is just WT times 1, so WT. What are the expenses of that person? Well, it's whatever that person decides to buy, so HD multiplied by the price of food plus MD multiplied by the price of other good, which is 1. And I have all the ingredients. Now I can just, like before, do the same trick to solve the model. So the trick is, first of all, I can already substitute MD again to simplify my objective function, and I get this, which looks pretty much the same as before. It's just that now I have prices instead of having stocks, but it's the same. So I take prices as given. So because obviously one islander doesn't affect the price for all the other islanders. So if I maximize with respect to HT, then I'm not going to go again into the details of that. But believe me when I say that, I get this demand for harvest. HD equals to beta times W over P. So what is W over P? So W is my whole income, so all I can buy divided by the price. So if I spent all what I can buy, or all what the islander can buy on harvest, then it would be that mean that beta is 1. So that's not the case. So beta is between 0 and 1. So it means that the demand for harvest is a certain fraction of the whole expense of the islander. Now what I can obviously, so if I want to go ahead and use the fact that harvest demand equals harvest supply, I have to aggregate the demand of one islander well, to take the fact that all our islanders are identical. So to know the demand for total harvest, all I do is I take the demand for harvest by one islander and multiply it by the total population LT. So I get HD equals LT HD, or big HD equals to beta W big L divided by P. All right. So just to sum up, what do we mean by general equilibrium, or what do we mean by an equilibrium? Well, it's the set of quantities and prices such that all agents behave optimally given prices. So they buy according to their preferences and according to what they can afford, and they choose their labor sector optimally. And all markets clear, so there's no sectors in which the demand is higher than supply or supply is higher than demand, no surplus of any kind, so everything is in equilibrium. So this equilibrium is defined by a certain number of equations that we already have used. So on the labor market, so the total labor of the supply by the islanders has to be equal to the labor in the harvest sector and the labor in the other goods sector. Optimal sector choice, so there's arbitrage, so as we have seen, so all the wages have to be the same. Equilibrium on the food market, so um, the demand for food has to equal the supply for food. So here we have seen that the demand for food is this quantity here, and the supply for food was this quantity there. So we can just equal one to the other. This is what we're going to do. Optimal production choice in the food sector. So this just means that the wage in the food sector has to be equal to its real marginal productivity that we already saw. Same thing for the production in the other food sector. So the marginal productivity is just one. So what do I do? As I said, I just have to equate food demand and food production. So into HT, which is I know that it's beta WL over P. Well, I can just use this optimal production choice, and so for instance, I divide by P here, I get W over P. I divide by P here, I get alpha S, and so I can just substitute W over P and get get this demand here, which is exactly what we had before. So as I said, since it's competitive market, so the first theorem of offer economics says that it should give us an efficient outcome, a Pareto optimal outcome. So this outcome is what we had gotten for the representative islander. In a sense, the representative islander could be thought of as a social planner that maximizes the welfare for the whole island. But we see that with a competitive market, we get the same thing.